Audio is on. And now video is on. iTunes is ready. We're ready to go. All right. We can do it. 1, 2, 3. Runsmith Enterprises presents episode 15 of Topics in Endurance Sports. I'm your host, Tim. Today is Thursday, March 15th, 2018. Hey, everybody. If you listen to this show, you will find out a way that you can win a free prize. This is the first time I have something to give away. So it'll go to one lucky listener, and I will tell you later in the show how you can win a prize, and I will tell you what it is. One thing I'll say is I'm recording in the evening. I rarely ever record in the evening, and I feel really out of whack doing it. I'm kind of tired. My eyes are out of focus, so I'm having a little trouble seeing. So we'll see how this goes. It's a little weird recording this late at night. I mean, my wife is already sleeping. That's how late it is. Anyway, we'll see how it goes. You can find out more about me at my website at runsmith.net. That's runsmith.net. For instance, email, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, all that stuff, plus my coaching services. So please check all that out. I'll repeat this at the end of the show. This episode of Topics in Endurance Sports is sponsored by Health IQ, an insurance company that helps health-conscious people like runners, cyclists, weightlifters, and vegetarians get lower rates on their life insurance. Go to healthiq.com/endurance to support the show and to see if you qualify. I will talk a little bit more about this later. What is today's topic? Well, usually I'm talking about a race I have just done. However, when I first created the podcast, that wasn't really the plan. The plan was, yes, I would cover my races, but I'd have a whole bunch of other episodes on a whole bunch of other topics. But it's not worked out that way, mainly because I'm so slow at getting them out. I guess I had delusions that I was going to get out a podcast a week like so many do. But if you're paying attention at all, you know I'm lucky to get one out every single month. So by then I've done a race, and then I'm reviewing the race. So this is one where I'm not reviewing a race, so it's a little bit unusual. But I have all types of topics and things I want to do that are not just reviewing races. So that's what we have here. So what I'm doing today is a book review. I did have an earlier show where I reviewed a book. I think it was one where I reviewed a race and a book. In this case, I'm just reviewing a book, and I'm going to tell a couple other stories. So the title of this one is Running Out and Other Stories of Endurance. All right, Running Out is the name of a book that I'm going to review today. A little bit from last time. So first of all, a grammar mistake. I was trying to read something, and the word summarily come up, and I said it wrong, rather amused at myself and embarrassed. So summarily. I think I was trying to say summarily or something, but it's summarily. I do know the word. I just had a brain cramp when I came across it. So in case you were wondering, I can say that word. I also was mistaken on when a series of tornadoes came through Oklahoma and took out my aunt and uncle's house. That happened in 1999. I said it happened in 2013. I think there were also a series of tornadoes in 2013. I think they've had two times when they had these gigantic set of tornadoes happen in the last 30 years. One was 1999, one was 2013, I think. And it was the one in 1999 that took out my aunt and uncle's house. So I did have that date wrong. Also, a few things about Camille Herron. So it's been kind of the Camille Herron show here lately. I know that's kind of weird, but there's just a lot of content I've been able to build around her. And so a little bit more about her. I forgot to mention that in the last episode, my daughter and I went to a talk that she gave, and I recorded the talk, and then I that was in the episode, I played the talk that she gave, snippets of the talk, not the whole talk. I forgot to mention at the end of the talk, she gave away a ton of stuff. This was all her own personal stuff. A lot of it were things that sponsors had sent her. So she just had so much of it that she gave it away. Like, she's been a member of USA teams traveling abroad. So she had like USA bags, pretty cool stuff like that. USA track and field bags and things like that. She had all types of extra clothing of sorts and running gear. I think maybe some shoes. I don't know. But anyway, she had a ton of stuff and she just raffled it all off. So my daughter won a hydration vest. I think it was maybe a Nathan hydration vest and also a handheld water bottle on top of the hydration vest. And my daughter won that. And that was, I looked it up, as well over $100 it was worth. And I won a big pack of gels. I forget what company it was, but it was all vanilla gel. I think it was Power. What's the company? Power or whatever. It was all their gels, like 24 vanilla gels, which was pretty awesome. So that's what I won. That's like $35 worth of stuff right there or something. So we came up pretty good on that, and all types of other people won as well. Also, in the episode, I messed up what she did in 2015. This was a year she ran a number of road races and really kicked butt. And I couldn't decide if she ran 3 or 4. I kept going back and forth. It was 4 that she ran. And here are the 4 that she did. She did the Mad City 100K in Madison, Wisconsin, and 7:26 was her time. She was first, and that was the fastest 100K on American soil. Then she did this race called the Run Winschoten, and that was in the Netherlands, I believe. That was also 100K. So she did do 2 100Ks in a row, and this was in September. So April and then September. And in that one, she won the IAU World Championship with a time of 7:08. That's 18 minutes faster than what she ran in April. After that, in October, just weeks later, she ran the Door County Fall 50 miler. That's also in Wisconsin. She ran that 50-mile race and broke the 50-mile world record. This would be the road world record. She broke that record, and that's probably the overall world record. That was held by Ann Trayson. Ann Trayson had done it in 5:40. Camilla Herron did it in 5. I don't have the time here. Do I have the time? I don't know. 5:38 or something. I don't have the time right here. But she broke that world record, I think not by a whole lot of minutes. And then finally, the 4th race in 2015, she won the world title, the second world title, because she had won the 100K. So she won her second world title at the first IAU 50K World Championship in Doha, Qatar. And it was evidently very hot and windy, and she ran that in 3 hours, 20 minutes, 58 seconds to capture the gold by over 7 minutes. So it was 4 road races in 2015 that she ran and won, and set a record of some sort or another in every single one of those cases. Also, just some Facebook stuff I got from her. She shared some of her recovery secrets. So here are some of her recovery secrets, because she's obviously very good at recovering. She can do a lot of long runs very often. She can also recover from races and do another race fairly soon. So she says that recovery is largely about blood flow and getting growth factors and micronutrients where it needs to go. So she likes to keep moving after a race. She'll do a jog or a walk as soon as she can after races. Maybe even a second run later in the day. She'll get massage. She'll use compression gear, recovery boots, things like this. Yes, she does the 4-to-1 carbs to protein as soon as she can after the race. Probably a lot of you have heard that. But she'll also just kind of pig out after races. Burgers, fries, tacos, whatever it is. But just to get a lot of nutrition in. She'll drink a lot after races. Electrolyte drinks and beer. She's okay with that. She tries to get a lot of sleep after races. Also, this is interesting, strength training. She'll say, I've often gotten home from races and done heavy weights with my upper body that evening or the next day. You get a surge of growth hormone if you push to fatigue with weights. And we did talk a little bit about that in the last episode, but I didn't talk about her doing it after a race. So that's kind of interesting, that she will either later in the day or the next day try to pump some iron with the upper body to get that growth hormone pushing through her body to help recover the legs. and everything else. Kind of interesting. And she'll also say sometimes she drinks Emergen C. This is a recovery drink, and take an iron pill after races. She's not sure if there's research to back this, but knowing the immune system is suppressed and all the red blood cell breakdown, it makes practical sense to take these things. So I did look up what Emergen C, that's the brand name, Emergen C, kind of a cute name, right? Emergency, EMERGEN-C. Get it? Emergen-C. And I looked up the ingredients. It's got a little bit of sugar, a bunch of vitamin C, a whole bunch of B vitamins, calcium, phosphorus, magnesium, zinc, chromium, sodium, manganese, and potassium. Can I tell you why all of those are in there? No, but I think there are a lot of things that evidently your body needs to recover and to build the immune system. It kind of reminded me that Karl Meltzer often will mention what he takes. Karl Meltzer, a great 100-mile runner, what he often takes to recover. I know I've heard him say it so much I can remember that he takes something called Ultragen. Kind of has a similar name, Emergen-C and Ultragen. So for fun, I looked up Ultragen, the stuff that he often takes, and it's like on his website. He's obviously sponsored by them. So I think he is. And I looked up what's in that, and that's similar to this Emergen-C. It's got a lot of the same stuff, but it also has vitamin D, and it also has protein and branched chain amino acids and glutamine. So it has a few extra things in it as well. But otherwise, they're kind of similar. The protein, Camille's just going to eat anyway. That's where she gets that. So the two things evidently have a similar profile of what's in there. And I think that's it from last time. I actually may have something else about Camille Harrigan next time. So, like I said, I'm kind of milking all that as much as I can. The Camille Herron show is what it's turned into. But we're done with that for today. All right, so again, today's topic's running out and other stories of endurance. So Running Out is the name of a book that I read and that I'm going to review. But also, I went online and I tried to get people to send me their original stories or poems or whatever. So I did this on my website. My Facebook. I have a group called Runsmith Enterprises. Please join the group, Runsmith Enterprises. Okay? I did it on there. I did it on Twitter. So I have a Twitter is RunSmithE, one word. RunSmithE is my Twitter, and you can find all this on runsmith.net. So on there, I ask people, hey, if you got a story, send me your story. And I also wanted just some Facebook running groups as well, and I posted in there. And I got a few responses. So I've got, I've got, in a sense, two unique responses. One of them happened to be the author of the book Running Out, so I'll mention that coming up here. Okay, so what about this book, Running Out? So Running Out is a novel, a fictional novel, completely fictional, which is kind of unique because generally in endurance sports, if we're talking about a book, you're probably guessing it's going to have something to do with training or nutrition or something like that, but this is not what this is. This is an actual novel. It's written by Dave Essinger. He's an associate professor of English up at the University of Findlay, Findlay, up in Ohio. He's not that far from me. So that's kind of how I connected with him. I've seen him on Ohio Facebook groups and found out about his book. So Dave Essinger at the University of Findlay. And you can get a lot of information about him at his website. It's dave-essinger.com. I'll try to put that on runsmith.net. All links that I can think about that are important, I'll put on runsmith.net. And usually I put pictures up there. There won't be many pictures for the show, but I usually put those up there as well. So dave-essinger.com has information about his writing and his teaching and anything else that might be interesting. A little bit about Dave. He's a past president of the Findlay Striders Running Club and running the club's race timing services. So if you do a 5K in Northwest Ohio, it might be him asking you for your bib tag in the finish chute. He also edits the University of Findlay's literary magazine, Slippery Elm, and done some other fictional writing for other magazines as well. Has been a general editor of some projects and things like this. So he does a lot he has his hands in a lot of writing things as well. There's a bunch of other stuff on his website, including some examples of his writing. He has completed 100-mile races, so he is an endurance runner. He's done the Mohican 100 5 times. That was my very first 100-mile race, and that is here in Ohio. I highly recommend it. It's one of the older 100-mile races in the country. Too bad I didn't have my podcast at the time, or I would have reviewed that. But it's not a trivial 100-mile race. It's got plenty of ups and downs to keep you working. But he's done that 5 times, as well as some other 100-milers, I believe. He's married, and his wife is actually a very good runner as well. She sometimes wins races. For his book, which is set in Canada, he actually went to Canada to research it. I thought that was pretty cool. And you can buy his book directly from the publisher, MainStreetRagBookstore.com. I'll put a link to that if I remember it, but I'm sure it's on DaveEssinger.com as well. So there are some bookstores up in Troy, Ohio that have it. The University Campus Bookstore where he teaches has it, and some other places. He is recording an audiobook, which is expected to be available anytime. In fact, he has sent a little snippet of his audiobook to me. So that'll be pretty interesting. I'm going to play that later. All right? So you'll be able to listen to part of it. So there's some information about Dave and where you can find out more information about him. So let me go over the book here. Now I have some notes that are not on my computer. Instead, they're on a pad of paper. Can you hear the pad of paper? And I'm kind of embarrassed. I'm going to have to put my glasses on. So I'm going to take my headphones off and assume that my voice is coming through okay. And I told you my eyes are just feeling really weak right now. I'm at the point where I really need to update my contact prescription. They're ready to be updated, but I haven't done that yet. So I'm moving some stuff around here. I'm moving my keyboard around and my recorder and everything else so I can read this pad of paper, and I have the book. So I'm holding the book up to the camera. And in case you don't know, I always record my podcasts and I put them up on YouTube. All right, so I'm holding the book up to the camera. And I'll put a picture of the book as well on the website if I think about it, runsmith.net. Okay, so I have a bunch of notes about the book. So first, let me read the back cover of the book because I've been talking about it. You don't know what it is yet. Let's see here. After a plane crash in a remote Canadian wilderness, the athlete hero of the book of Dave's riveting debut novel faces the race of his life. So it's a plane crash to save his wife, his daughter, and himself. Dan is the protagonist. Dan's past is fraught with sinuous turns and compelling complexity, but his present path is straight and clear survival. We follow his every stride, sometimes as breathless as he is, as he runs toward rescue or disaster. So there's the general setting of the whole book right there. There's a plane crash up in Canada. Dan is a runner. He's an ultra runner. And while his wife and his child stay at the plane, his wife has broken her leg. His wife is a runner as well, but she has broken her leg. That's why she cannot run. And so she's got to stay with the kid who's only like 2 years old. Dan takes off in the wilderness because they've crashed in the middle of nowhere. And there's a reason for it, that they've crashed in the middle of nowhere. So he's got to try to run to help. So this is the general idea of the book. But of course, the book has a lot of other drama in it as well that you read about as he's running. Okay, so you're going back to certain events in Dan's life. Let's see, is there anything else in the back I want to read? I'll read another little synopsis. For his debut novel, Essinger takes his protagonist, a competitive runner, and pits him against the brutal powers of Mother Nature. The only finish line for Dan in this race is the thin, nearly invisible strip between life and death. Just following the daunting course he takes on is a 20 nail-biting experience. I'm sorry, this is real dark what I'm reading here, so So there's a little bit about the book. Let's see, I'm seeing if there's anything else in the back here to read. The front cover has a picture of a footprint, and Dave told me that's his actual shoe print. It was some unique shoe, like a Cabela's shoe I had never heard of. But that's his own footprint on the front cover of the book. Let's see, what else do I have? Okay, I should let you know. Obviously, I'm not a professional book reviewer. I've read book reviews, and they're always like really good synopsis of the book, and then they kind of relate it to what's happening in the world or something else, or to other literature and everything else. I'm not going to do that. As you can see, I'm just kind of giving you some idea about the book. I'm gonna read little bits and pieces of the book that I found interesting. All right, so this is not a proper book review. I'll tell you right now, I love the book. All right, you need to go read the book. It's freaking awesome. All right, let's see. Dave did sign my book, by the way, and you can get a signed copy. If you go to his website, you'll find out how. I do note that the action starts very quickly in the book. You do not have to read very long, and there's a whole bunch of action right at the very beginning. So I've got a whole bunch of pages marked out that I had something interesting to read here, okay? So I'm not going to bother telling you the page because it could vary from edition to edition here. I'm going to start on... Let's see, I almost told you the page, didn't I? Okay, let's see here. One interesting thing about this book is he's got a lot of chemistry in it, which is kind of fascinating, which I like. So he said he did consult with a couple of people about the chemistry. So one thing he talks about at the beginning, actually before we get to the chemistry, I'm going to go ahead and go on order that I have it here. Oh, this is an interesting... So here, I'm just giving you some examples of his writing that I thought was rather interesting. At one point, Dan looks up, or he remembers looking up at geese flying, and there's one goose behind the flock. So he writes about this. So there's one goose behind the flock, and he said, high V's, they make a little shape of V's. High V's of geese had been flying over all day, and though the low one seemed to rocket past overhead, Dan knew it was a trick of perspective, that the lone goose never stood a chance of catching the high flocks. The feeling it gave him then was not sad exactly, or quite empty, but compelling in its simplicity. Of course, the goose was being left behind and would die, and of course there was nothing for it to do but to try its hardest anyway. Kind of interesting, right? This goose, what else can it do? It's not going to catch the flock, but all it can do is go after it. All right, let's see what else I have here. This might be one of the chemistry segments. So he has a number of little chemistry or biochemistry segments that he sets off in italics, which obviously does fit in with the book. It's not just randomly thrown in here. So here's one. On average, men are faster runners than women over every distance up to the threshold of glycogen depletion. Then, when fuel stores run dry after 2 or 3 hours of sustained intense effort, biological rules change. At the cellular level, starvation sets in, and continued functioning becomes predicated upon efficiency. Greater muscle mass becomes a liability, and the relative attributes of slow twitch and fast twitch muscle fibers become more relevant. Slow twitch fibers do not produce explosive power, but burn resources sparingly to generate sustained drive. Loaded with mitochondria, slow twitch fibers predominate in effective distance runners and create a denser, visibly darker tissue. In a chicken or turkey, these muscles make up the dark meat. Men, due to higher testosterone levels, have more and larger fast twitch fibers than women do, allowing for greater muscular power output, assuming steady supplies of glycogen and glucose. With limited energy for input, though, output diminishes, and powering this larger cargo costs more in resources. Women's smaller fast twitch fibers tend to operate closer to peak efficiency under glucose-poor conditions. They also represent less weight that must be driven, a significant advantage under starvation conditions. post-glycogen depletion, a woman may therefore slow down less than a man would and be able to carry on longer before succumbing to exhaustion. So we've often heard about, women have certain advantages the longer the race goes. And so there is some biochemistry that could be related to why this is. Let's see here. What's next I have? You can hear me flipping through the book, right? Here's something about when Dan has been running for quite a while. He writes this: Dan's progress now was entirely unbeautiful, a flailing, stomping, splashing scramble. It was what he had practiced, though, in epic mud all summer, over rocky trails covered by soft snow in winter, and through thick leaves in fall. This was core strength. This was proprioception. Proprioception. See, I should have practiced reading this. This is all of those tiny stabilizing muscles in his body working in concert for balance and momentum. Maybe it was too late for him to ever be graceful or purely fast again, but damn it, this is right here. It was what he did. So he's talking about all the running we do on those trails, kind of thinking about that. He talks about the Cori cycle, a little bit more biochemistry. Let's see what this one says. When a great deal of energy is required quickly, the skeletal muscles generate it through glycolysis. Glycolysis. You wouldn't know I'm a chemist, would you? Though each molecule of glucose individually supplies very little energy, the speed of the reaction pathway in the cytoplasm can increase dramatically by up to 2,000 times during strenuous physical labor. This produces pyruvate too rapidly to metabolize, so cells reduce it to lactate, which diffuses out into the blood. The liver then selectively converts that lactate back to pyruvate, from which it generates glucose through gluconeogenesis. That glucose returns to skeletal muscles through the blood. This process, in which glucose is converted to pyruvate, then to lactate, and then back to glucose, is called the Cori cycle. The top speed of this cycle determines one's lactate threshold. Lactate is seen as an enemy by some athletes, as a limiter. Really, though, its production assists the muscles, shifting metabolic burden to the liver and prolonging glucose reserves. I mean, I love that this is in the book because it gives you this chemistry lesson as you're reading, and it helps you understand some of the things that's happening in your body when you're running. Let's go to page... about halfway through the book here as far as my readings go. Do I have one here? No. You're bearing with me, right? I think there's some more biochemistry. Oh, here's a little bit about, I guess it could be related to elevation training or running or hallucinating. Hypoxia, most simply, is a radical depletion of oxygen in the blood. In extreme physical exertion, the skeletal muscles desperately demand oxygen. They cannot convert pyruvate by glycolysis into CO2 for energy without it. Need the oxygen. The problem is that greedy muscles aren't the only system drawing on a finite supply of blood oxygen. The liver, for example, needs it to convert body fat into ATP. So we think about oxygen going to our muscles, but yeah, other parts need it as well. Let's go here to this page. Oh, this was a part where he's talking about, so again, there's family drama going on here. So at one point he's talking about his father-in-law. He goes to his father-in-law's house, and his father-in-law is a hunter, and there's trophy heads up in the wall. So he's kind of pondering these trophy heads in the wall. I just thought this was kind of a funny passage. Glass-eyed animals galleried every wall of Deb's childhood home. That's his father-in-law. At dinner, the preserved heads on the facing wall, an elk flanked by two smaller antelope-like things reminded Dan of anatomy classes and biology lab. He couldn't shake a phantom whiff of formaldehyde beneath the smells of turkey and gravy and pies. He imagined the preserving fluids leaching out into the air, the gunned-down animals having their own last laugh over the slow poisoning of Bernard's assembled family. Bernard being the father-in-law. So I thought that was rather amusing. Oh, here's the part here. So at one point, he describes a race that he does, or that I think he does, or he's talking about. There was a website. The race was a month away, and it looked like a 3-hour drive to get there. They needed volunteers, especially medical and health professions types. He'd heard one of the state schools brought their whole podiatry grad program every year for the one-of-a-kind fieldwork experience. It'll be wild, he told Deb. Deb is his wife. He pitched it to her as a curiosity, something to go and observe. Besides, it's in this huge park and forest, beautiful scenery, all that. I happen to know that he is talking about the Mohican 100. I'm sure that's what he's talking about. Dan and Deb are in Ohio. They do live in Ohio. The book's set in the plane crash is in Canada, but there's a lot of flashbacks of things happening in Ohio. So I'm sure he's talking about the Mohican 100 because the Mohican 100 does have a whole bunch of podiatry students that come to the race. I know because I used one after lap 3, I believe. I got my feet taped up. It was my first 100, and I didn't know how to take care of my feet. So there it is, the Mohican 100 made the book. Let's see here. We're getting closer to the end of the book here. Here's a little passage. He just has one line here. Death was kind of my pacer. How many of us have maybe felt like that in the middle of a race? A little bit more about, this is a pretty funny passage, actually. He's thinking about these, like, I don't watch TV, but there's like these survivor shows or reality shows, I guess, where people are out in nature, or just some story about some guy who miraculously survived. Like, remember that guy who had to cut his own arm off? Stuff like that, So there's stories of people who have survived amazing, harrowing experiences in the wild. So he's thinking about those, but of course, all those people lived. So he's saying, maybe they should have a show about the people who died, So he says, first, he had to survive. They only did shows on people who lived. I shouldn't be alive, in quotes. Maybe he'd spark a special series. Quote, shit, no wonder I'm dead. Quote, how much great TV do we never see just because some inadequate SOB failed to live through it? How many deaths did it take to make an exception? The reason why the star shouldn't be alive. So he kind of takes the other point of view. Yeah, I guess there's a lot of people. We didn't get to hear their cool story because they actually didn't make it. He talks about black mice. I had never heard of this term. But maybe you have. I don't know. Though he'd never seen them, Dan had heard about black mice, another biological quirk and facet of ultra lore. That's when you know to pack it in, a veteran had told him. Your race is over. There's no coming back once that shit starts. Black mice were hallucinatory dots in the peripheral vision that occurred at night under phenomenal physical distress. They would skitter in and out of a flashlight beam, disappearing faster than you could look directly at them. The black mice were uniformly a harbinger of disastrous, impending deterioration and collapse. So he goes on to give a little kind of physiological description of how they happen, or they might happen. But I have never heard of black dots or mice, and I've not had black mice. Well, here's a good little description of something, I thought. I don't know if he made this up or not. He talks about, let's see here. I'll read this whole paragraph. He was aware of the minute decisions that went into each individual step as he leaned forward, felt for the ground for a split second before he put his weight down. He's been running a long time at this point and is pretty out of it, just trying to stay up. Anyway, felt for the ground for a split second before he put his weight down, then rolled through, pushed off, and began reaching forward with his other foot. In this way, combining faith, there's the word again. In this way, combining faith, proprioception, and a fearful sideways scanning of the ground he could not look directly at, he kept moving. When he misstepped the first time, he was too exhausted to recover his balance. A stone shifted beneath his step, rolling his ankle outward, and he threw his whole body limp, just let himself go weightless on the treacherous piece of ground. Judas rocks, they were called, footing that looked firm until you committed your weight. So I'd never heard the term Judas rocks before. I don't know if you made that one up or not, but I like it. And I think this is the last little tidbit of reading I have. Oh, wait, I know I have one more because there's one that I really, really, really liked. I'll get back to it. It's good that I'm saving it. So here we're getting toward the end. Will he make it, or will he survive, or will he not survive? I'm not going to tell you. You'll have to read the book. He never really prayed and didn't think he knew how to mean it now. Who or what would he appeal to? What was there that he believed in? Oh, glycogen, he thought, as much lamenting as mocking, in which we trust. Sad as it really made him, contemplating the end of his poor fucked self, still he reached, and all he came up with was parody. Holy trinities, chemistries, triglycerides. He would not be swayed by temptation or place his faith on fickle adenosine triphosphates. Lead us not into unsustainable lactate loadings. Gluconeogenesis, an everyday miracle, real transubstantiation, as close to energy from nothing as it got. He believed. Saint dopamine, Saint epinephrine, Saints adrenaline and endorphin. He would transmute body fat and protein, his muscle tissue and corporeal being into energy. He would cannibalize himself and be reborn. Eat flesh of his own flesh, be nourished, he devoured, move forward. So there's a little spiritual paragraph there. And one last thing, I actually missed this one, which is interesting. So here's a little couple paragraphs that I actually sent this. I'm a cross-country coach. I actually sent this to the other coaches. And I think next fall, when cross-country season is going, I'm going to read this to my kids that I coach. And this is the general idea of this is something a lot of ultra runners, you've heard the phrase, running, our sport is your sport's punishment. You've seen shirts maybe that say that. Runners will wear these shirts. The football players, when they get punished, they have to go run, right? So our sport is your sport's punishment. So this is a little play on that idea, but it's different. So let me read it. And this is a coach. So he's flashing back, I think, to what a coach tells him. So Dan, the protagonist, is a guy who ran in high school and college. And so there's a lot of flashing back, I guess, to his college days. So there's a lot of good stuff like that. Like he describes some cross-country races that he does, which is kind of cool, and workouts. You're gonna hear something from Dave about one of his workouts. Anyway, here's the little passage. There's a difference between your sport and everyone else's, he went on. There's a fundamental personality difference between you as distance runners and just about everyone else on this planet. That difference is you know pain really well, and even though you know how much it's going to hurt, you choose that path again and again every day. I mean, a football player knows every play he might get hit so hard he'll end up in a wheelchair. Hockey players know they're maybe not finishing the season with all their same teeth in the same places. Firefighters know they could get burned alive. Soldiers expect to get shot at. But all of them, they hope it won't happen today. You guys, you know what's going to happen. And every day for the last 90 days of the season, you chose the pain anyway. I want you to remember that tomorrow morning at a race. When you're in total oxygen debt and your legs feel like sand, and by God, it just hurts, I want you to remember this. Wait, I chose this. I want this. I love this. That is pretty cool. So I kind of can't wait to read that to my kids this cross-country season, because that is a very good point. It's one thing to put yourself in a risky situation. It's another thing to purposely put yourself in as much pain as you can possibly put in. And even a boxer, he knows he's going to get hit, but he's trying to dodge it all the time. He's trying not to get hit. He's trying to avoid the pain. But not runners. They're trying to do it as much as they can, and other endurance athletes as well, triathletes or whoever. They're trying to get into as much pain as they can possibly get into. So I really love that. So that is all the bits and pieces I have from the book. So again, it is really freaking awesome. And it's to use a book reviewer phrase, I would say it's really gripping. Once I got partway through and was really getting into what is going to happen, I just couldn't put the thing down, honestly. I was reading as fast as I could to find out what was going to happen. And there's all this intermingled drama going along with it. So it is really a good book. And a little bit later in the podcast, Dave sent me an MP3 of part of his audio book. So we're going to listen to him actually read part of the book. So that'll come a little bit later. All right. But until then, I'm going to go over some of the things that other people sent me. All right. So that was the book. We'll come back to the book, but here are some things people sent me. Oopsie, I'm banging things. I'm putting my headphones back on. This podcast is really unprofessional, but what can I say? Okay, here's a poem I received. So I'm reading some more. As you can see, I'm not very good at reading when I have to read. Anyway, here's a poem I received from a woman named Brandy Kanan. I'm not sure how to say her last name. It looks like Kanan. Let's say Conan. That'd be cool. It's not Conan. But anyway, this is a poem from Brandy Conan. And I apologize, Brandy, because I'm sure when you read a poem, you should be able to read it in a great style. And as you can tell, I won't do that. But I did read this a couple of times, so we'll see how I can do. A poem from Brandy Kanan, untitled. I know it seems drastic from your point of view. I want to eat fresh air and drink that morning dew. You ask, who is this girl all laced up in her shoes? Where does she come from? Which path will she choose? You'll find me deep in the woods, howling up the moon, but I promise you, babe, I'll be home soon, 'cause I'm a wild one with a wild heart. Please don't try to tame me. It'll rip me apart. I'll be lost in that trail, reconnecting with me. But don't worry, love, with you is where I'll always be. I've just got this urge, and it's pulling me on. I need the dirt underfoot to feel the blaze of the sun. I want to traipse through the desert like that horse with no name, bounding wild and free over rocky and unforgiving terrain. But at the end of the day, when the journey is through, don't doubt for a second that I'm coming back to you. I've got to push this animal body to its limit and make myself proud. I long for that wildness where I can be primal, uninhibited, and wild. But don't worry, love, because I can promise you this. When this race is over, I'll greet you with the most tender kiss. So forgive me if I wander and chase down these dreams. I know they are lofty, but not as crazy as they seem. I'm still just a girl with a wild and open heart, with a hunger for the pain and the courage to start. Written by Brandy Kanan. Sorry if I say that wrong. Hey, I read that pretty well. I actually left out one word. It's a small word, but I wasn't going to go back and redo it. I thought I read it fairly well for me. Anyway, thank you to Brandy. Brandy says she lives in Ohio, Springdale, Ohio, with her husband and 2 kids. So she is writing that for someone special, I guess. And she is very slowly working towards her ultra dream. So I'm not exactly sure what races she's run yet, but she does want to run an ultra, it sounds like. So thank you very much, Brandy Kane. I really, really, really like that. I think we can all relate to some extent with that poem. That was wonderful. I have another short story here. I hope it's short. I'm going to try to read this. And I have not read this aloud to myself. I'm hoping it doesn't take too long. I probably could time it, but I'm not going to. This is a story sent to me by someone named Bill Kenley. I think that's right, Bill Kenley. And he has written he's going to publish a bunch of short stories in a book. selection of short stories in a book. He also has a book he's already written. I'll mention that at the end here. That's already been published. So this guy is an actual writer. And he did give me a note that K1, at some point I will say K1. That's actually the name of a person. That's a nickname. Someone's nickname is K1. His actual name is Sherman Kindle in the story. He's the narrator of all the stories in this collection. And he's also the protagonist in his novel. Maybe it's the novel that he already wrote. He's the protagonist in that novel. The reason for the 1 is that he has a twin brother known as K2. So when I say K1, I'm talking about Sherman Kindle, who has a twin brother K2. Okay? Just keep that in mind. Anyway, the name of this short story is called The Sword You Forge. Here we go, by Bill Kenley. Kleiny's sword reminded me of a narwhal horn I'd seen once at the Museum of Science and Industry in Chicago. Scrimshaw, I think the term was for the chiseled artwork on that yellowed ivory. My teammates' carvings were scratched out on a less exotic medium, a butternut branch he'd found on a riverbank, but he'd worked on it in the same obsessive, patient way I imagine sailors used to scrape away at walrus and whalebone for years on end as they sailed the lonely waters hugging the earth. However, rather than while in the belly of a whaling ship cruising far out at sea, Kleiny is another runner on this team. Kleiny chipped away at his particular piece of folk art in the ass end of a big yellow while rolling down the highway. His obsession began one late summer night in the glow of our campfire while at camp. The more he tweaked his talisman, the more precious it was to him. That year was his senior year. At camp, he'd claimed the number 1 spot on our team, his substantial natural talent having bloomed the year before. He treated his success the same way he treated his sword's evolution, as something beyond logic, something mysterious and magical and intuitive in the extreme. For Kleiny, running was all about the intricacies, the hundreds of tiny little details, any one of which, should he get it wrong, might end up in poor performance. If Coach said to do a half-mile warm-up, Kleiny wondered why not a mile. The difference in his obsessive mind was potentially disastrous. If our workout consisted of 5 half-mile repeats, Kleiny worried that 4 repeats of 1,000 meters might be better, might in fact be the difference between a good and bad race our next time out. 12 ounces of Gatorade? 10 seemed like a better number. If he drank 10 and ran well, clearly those 2 ounces he'd not consumed would have been the reason. The only thing he didn't nitpick was mileage. That he didn't like to think about too much. Thanks to his natural talent, he didn't have to. Chambers, on the other hand, was a mileage hog and had been since his first high school race. That season, his senior year as well, he turned into a steamroller, improving, unlike Kleiny, with nearly every race. This he chalked up to being a greedy mileage beast, a year-round warrior. That summer, due to consistent training over the previous 3 years, never missing a day, never pushing too hard and risking injury, yet always pushing, he'd achieved his goal of averaging more than 10 miles a day, more than 70 miles a week, and he didn't care how he got it in. 3 miles in the dark of early morning before work. 7 in the blazing sun after, 10 all at once around midnight after the heat of the day had faded. For Chambers, running was a profoundly simple endeavor. It was all about adding up the miles. He openly mocked Klein, I think this is Kleiny. Evidently Kleiny's the nickname of this guy. I'm just going to keep saying Kleiny. He openly mocked Kleiny's sense of mystery and wonder about how one might get better. It was good-natured, friendly teasing, well, at least at first. You think running backwards might make you faster running forward? He'd laugh as we watched Kleiny do 30-meter strides in reverse, kicking his heels backwards. His neck twisted so he could see where he was running. It was a hot August afternoon early in the season. You sure you don't want to just get in an extra 3 miles with me instead? I read about this in Runner's World, Kleiny said after he slowed to a backwards walk. It's supposed to be the magic bullet, guaranteed to cut 10 seconds off your PR. Everything's a magic bullet to you, Chambers said. He shook his head and chuckled. Pickle juice, he said. Remember that, K1? When he drank pickle juice every day to avoid cramps? I nodded, and he hadn't even been having cramps before he started drinking it, I said, and he started getting them after, laughed Keen as he tried out a backward sprint and stopped halfway through. Shit, man, that's just dumb. Anyone ask Chambers? 3 more miles? That day, before doing his backward strides, Kleiny had run the last mile of our workout barefoot. He claimed it was proven that the reason the Kenyans are so good was that they didn't wear shoes, something, he argued, to do with their enhanced feel for the ground. To this, Chambers guffawed and said that Kenyan dominance had nothing to do with running barefoot and had everything to do with running to and from school, sometimes as many as 14 miles roundabout through their entire childhoods. They're logging 70-mile weeks in the first grade, he said, a grin on his face at Kleiny's nonsense. None of us were interested in joining Chambers to make it an even 10 that day. We preferred sitting on the grass, taking in the strange sight of Kleiny running backwards. Chambers wasn't laughing anymore as the tournament came on that year. At the start of September, he moved up from 6th man to 4th and then made a most surprising leap to 2nd man as October approached. In 1 month, he'd turned into a runaway freight train, his momentum building with each success, a model of grit and focus. He was our team captain. And suddenly, thanks to his breakthrough, he was captaining a team that had a real chance to go to state. But to get there, we needed Kleiny down where he'd started the season. Unfortunately, he was going in the opposite direction. And it wasn't like he didn't care. That was the problem. In fact, he was more obsessed with insignificant minutiae than ever. It was all there on his sword, covered with intricate patterns and imagery, the handle polished and glowing from its creator's nervous burnishing over the preceding 3 months. It told the story of his season. He was carving what looked to be a question mark in the butt of the handle, one of the few spaces left without decoration, as we rode the bus to our last meet of the season before the tournament. "What are you reading?" Kleiny asked Chambers across the open space between the 2 back seats where the seniors sat. He didn't look up from his sword. "Once a runner," said Chambers. He glanced over at the other back seat of his bus where Kleiny was sprawled out, his attention on his carving. He rolled his eyes, then looked his thumb, and used to flip a page. "Again?" asked Kleiny, his eyes down. "Why would you read a book more than once?" "There's good stuff in there," said Chambers. He stared across the back seats, but Kleiny couldn't feel it. "Lessons, things you forget if you don't have something to remind you." "Kind of like the Popeye." Redo. "Kind of like the Bible," said Popeye as he leaned back over the bus seat. "Kind of," said Chambers. He smiled at Popeye, and Popeye smiled back. "Well," said Kleiny, his head still down, "read me something so I get faster." He blew a curled shaving that looked like a hangnail off into the black rubber mat on the bus floor. "I'll read you something," said Chambers, "but it won't make you faster." "Well, just read it anyway," said Kleiny, eyes still down. "Teach us a lesson." Chambers flipped the book to a folded down page. Dark ink stained the margins. The bus grew quiet but for the scritch, scritch, scritch of the tip of Kleiny's knife on the soft wood of his sword. Chambers began reading. What was the secret, they wanted to know. In 1,000 different ways they wanted to know the secret. And not one of them was prepared, truly prepared to believe it had not so much to do with chemicals and zippy mental tricks as with that most unprofound and sometimes heart-rending process of removing, molecule by molecule, the very tough rubber that comprised the bottoms of his training shoes. Let me read that sentence again. And not one of them was prepared, truly prepared to believe that it had not so much to do with chemicals and zippy mental tricks as with that most unprofound and sometimes heart-rending process of removing, molecule by molecule, the very tough rubber that comprised the bottoms of his training shoes. The trials of miles of trials. He closed the book and stared hard at Kleiny. "Here endeth the lesson." In response, Kleiny continued to work his jackknife, his attention unfailingly on the detailing. "Did you hear that?" said Chambers. His voice was tight and quiet, his eyes bright. "Were you listening?" "Hear what?" said Kleiny. "The secret." Kleiny stopped working away and finally looked Chambers in the eye. "The secret? The secret to running fast?" Leo began to laugh. So did I. Chambers shook his head, annoyed. Seriously, read it again, Kleiny begged. Chambers tossed in the book. Read it yourself, he said. You ought to read the whole thing anyway, not just the part you think has the secret. No way, said Kleiny. Why would I read a whole book? That would take forever. Just tell me. Chambers looked over at the bus seat. Looked over at me. Chambers looked at me over the bus seat. Can you believe this, he said. Just kick his ass today, I said, grinning. Maybe then he'll read the book. Maybe then he'll think reading a book is the secret. Good idea, said Chambers. And that afternoon, after Chambers did kick Kleiny's ass for the first time, after he kicked all of our asses and went on to place first in the meet for his first win ever, after Kleiny wilted in shock after Chambers left him with a mile to go, after Kleiny ran a time over 17 minutes for the first time that season, after all that, he was crushed. I've been taking these vitamins that are supposed to make my finish stronger, he groaned as he sat on a bleached-out bench back at our camp, exactly 10 ounces of Gatorade in one hand. I've been using this roller on my calves every night. I've been doing ice baths. Ice baths suck. Why aren't I getting faster? He had this intricate little carved sword in his other hand. It had become his security blanket. He rubbed away with his thumb at the hilt. Chambers had had enough. He stood from where he'd been stretching and drinking a can of Coke on his towel and walked into the woods next to our camp. He quickly returned with a heavy, fallen branch. It had to have been 3 feet long and a good 10 pounds, roughly the same size as a baseball bat, with a tip of sharp splintered wood rather than a rounded bulb. It was a nice, sturdy whooping stick. He made his way over to where Kleiny sat in confusion and misery. Get up with that thing, that puny little knife you've been working on all year. Let's go, me and you. He began swinging his piece of wood about like it was a broadsword, and he was some knight preparing for a battle to the death. Kleiny just stared. What? He finally said. You've been messing around with that thing all season, worrying it like you've been worrying about how many meters you're supposed to do for your strides. Let's go, me and you. I'm going to show you my stick I've been working on for the last 4 years. We were all confused, not just Kleiny, but Chambers was in teaching mode. Stand up with that precious little piece of nothing and see how it goes against this sword. He banged his branch on the ground with a heavy thump. This sword I started making back in my freshman year when I was the third slowest guy on the team. He pounded the ground again. This sword I made by putting in mile after mile, building it up until I was able to keep packing on more miles and more miles until I finally had this massive thing. He raised his log above his head, holding it with both hands. This heavy son of a bitch. And with that, he swung and hit Kleiny's knife out of his hand. He then took 2 steps and smashed it in a single blow, burying half of it in the ground. Jesus, said Kleiny after a shocked moment. What did you do that for? Chambers threw his log back in the ground next to Kleiny's crushed sword. The trials of miles, he said, and then he quoted John L. Parker's book to Kleiny, this time entirely from memory, and this time his good friend heard him. And that's the story. There is a little postscript here that says, what was the secret they wanted to know? In 1,000 different ways they wanted to know the secret, and not one of them was prepared, truly prepared to believe that it had not so much to do with chemicals and zippy mental tricks as with that most unprofound and sometimes heart-rending process of removing, molecule by molecule, the very tough rubber that comprised the bottom of his training shoes. The trial of miles of trials. Actually, I guess that wasn't a postscript. That was just Chambers reciting from memory that passage again. So thank you very much. That was from Bill Kenley. He's the author. The other book is called The High School Runner, and in parentheses, Freshman. So I kind of like to read that book, being a high school running coach. And so I think the moral of his story is pretty darn obvious, but it's a rather amusing way to get the point across. Maybe I should read that to my kids, but that would probably take a little bit while. So anyway, thank you very much, Bill Kenley. I will post a link to your other book that you have, and people should check out his this new book when it comes out as well. Okay, I have one other thing, and this is something I just came across, and in fact, I just came across it. It's not in my notes, and it's on my phone, so I'm going to lift up my phone, put my darn glasses back on again, and I lift up my phone. Let's see how long I've been going for about 1 hour. Doing all right. Okay, here's something I came across. Actually, I found it on Twitter. And it's about a guy named Tyler Beckett. This is real. This is not fiction or anything. A guy named Tyler Beckett. And the story is that this guy, I'm not sure how old he was. He might have been only 16, maybe a little older. Committed suicide. For real, okay? This is for real. He was from Marietta, Georgia, and he was a runner. And there is now a race in his honor. There is a website called Running for Tyler. His name was Tyler Beckett. And again, I'll put this Running for Tyler. It's just runningfortyler.com, just how it sounds. Running, FORTYLER, runningfortyler.com. But I'll put it on the website. And there's a 5K race. I'm not sure when it is. If you're interested, go check it out if you're anywhere near Marietta, Georgia, for Tyler Beckett, who committed suicide. He was evidently suffering from depression. So I'm sure this race has something to do with, obviously, in memory of him, and I think maybe for suicide prevention awareness and this type of thing. The reason, though, I'm bringing this up is not just that, which is very sad, is that he wrote a poem. And so I'll read to you the poem. It's called I Am a Runner. And remember, this is written by a kid. I am a runner. Through mud and rain and whatever may come, I know nothing but perseverance. I am a runner. With nothing but an iron will, I press on. There are no stops or timeouts, only a will to survive and improve. I am a runner. I eat my weight in pasta and drink enough water to drown a fish, all to prepare for a half-minute or less of running. Because I hate running. But on the run, when I feel as if I must give up, the run pushes me forward, saying, you're better than this. Because I did not choose to be a runner is what I am. Tyler Beckett, August 3rd, 2016. And that's kind of sobering because, we've heard many stories about how running saved people, I think. A couple of people come to mind, the famous ultra runners Katra Corbett and Charlie Engle, both suffered from addictions, drug addictions. They're now very successful runners, and I have no doubt they attribute running to a large, maybe not the whole reason why, but for part of the reason why they've gotten over that, gotten through that addiction and are surviving well now. And I know I've heard stories of other people with depression or other mental illnesses or issues, and running has been a way to help with all that. I guess the thing to remember is it doesn't always help. Those are really lovely feel-good stories, and they're real stories, but just because someone's running doesn't mean their problems are solved. I guess that's one way to think about this. It might be someone who we know used to have problems, and now they're a runner, and we think they're okay. Maybe not. Or someone we don't know anything about, and we say, look at that runner, maybe they're successful running, maybe they run very well, and we think they've got it all together, but not necessarily. So, anyway, again, I'll put a link to that up, and you can, maybe you can be interested in that run if you're in the area. Okay, that is it for all of my stories. I'm going to play you an MP3 from Dave's book. Before I do that, though, again, thanks to Health IQ for for sponsoring this episode. Health IQ uses science and data to secure lower rates on life insurance for health-conscious people like you. So some facts. 70% of our exclusive rate clients get approved at the top rate class. Fastest growing life insurance company with over $5 billion in coverage. Here's a testimonial from the great Ryan Hall. It's perfect because it's made for people like me with a healthy, active lifestyle. The lower heart rates that many pro athletes have can sometimes negatively affect insurance rates. Hall liked that Health IQ uses active lifestyle as an asset in getting a good life insurance rate rather than it being a detriment. Hall also commented that he appreciated how Health IQ made the process easy and simple for him, given how limited his time already is. So again, you can support the show, please, by going to healthiq.com/endurance. Please do the endurance part. That helps the show. And you may find that you can get yourself some good life insurance at a better rate than you're getting now. So let's go on to listen to what Dave reads here. I've listened to part of this, has a very good speaking voice, and this is directly from his audiobook. I love audiobooks. However, when I'm reviewing a book, I'd rather read the book so I can put notes in it, but otherwise I prefer audiobooks, to be honest, so I can listen in my car and stuff like that. So here is Dave reading from his debut novel, Running Out.
Back in Ohio, because he could think of nothing else to do about it, Dan threw himself into the speed work with all he had. Maybe, if he just did the training, the rest of it, the liking it, would come. He started throwing in a set of Yasso diagnostics every week, and the morning after their graduation ceremonies found him jogging yet again, before sunrise, to the track. It was dark between street lamps, but a pale moon cast its own light. The stadium track was easy to see, and he had it all to himself this early. The Yasso interval workout called for 10 800-meter sprints, with a modest recovery between each. It was a popular Runner's World type gauge of fitness. The average time of all 10 sprints, in minutes and seconds, supposedly predicted marathon capability in hours and minutes. For example, 10 800s run at 2.5 minutes apiece indicated potential for a 2:30 marathon. Dan was impatient by the end of his third repeat. Every time he coasted to a stop, his tech felt clammy against his skin, the air around him stifling and too humid. As he started the next rep, he knew he wasn't stopping at the 800. With an eye to his watch, he turned a third and fourth lap for a full mile at his old 5K pace. It felt good, his ribs heaving. On his recovery lap, something creaked in the metal joints of the stands, and a rabbit in the infield twitched an ear, watching him. Above him, almost imperceptibly, the sky was lightening. He saw that he was going to do it, start over and repeat the whole workout doubled, with 1,600 repeats instead of 800s. Same quarter-mile recoveries. More than 3 5Ks at 5K pace made the proposition interesting. The first 4 full miles hurt, in the good ordinary way. After the 6th, he looked around the stadium self-consciously. If anyone were watching, it would look like he was just destroying himself. But he wasn't, he thought. He wasn't, that was the thing. He was making himself stronger still, picking a pace and holding it through exhaustion. He was sorting a thing out, determining who was boss here, between his body and his mind. On his 8th mile rep, the wet air was searing his throat, and he noted the edges of his vision losing definition and narrowing at the peripheries. Halfway through the 9th, he turned to blow his nose toward the infield, and in the growing light it satisfied him to see a speck of red in the resulting flash over the grass. He finished the set of 10, and jogging a cool-down lap, wondered how he'd feel after another, if he did 20 one-mile reps instead of 10 at 5K pace. Deb would be awake, getting her breakfast, wondering why he wasn't back yet. Passing the start mark, it hardly surprised him at all when his legs spun again into motion. His times kept equaling up the same because he made them. When the pace on his watch read too fast at the start of each new interval, he reined himself back, and when it threatened to sag in the despairing belly of every third lap, he lunged forward, keeping his posture aggressive. A couple times, his legs went numb for a whole mile and part of the next, and instead of thinking about the pain's inevitable return, he tried to enjoy its absence, to push hard with the fleeting freedom allowed him. Once he had started each new mile, he knew he would finish it, and that encouraged him. After his 20th lap, he wobbled around for a bit, catching his breath and letting his heart rate slow. Certainly this had been a tiring exercise, but it hadn't been pointless. If he was going to do this, make the transition back to targeted race training, he might as well test what he could really withstand. And 20 miles at pace hadn't broken him yet. He shambled back to the start line, his legs tired but not exhausted, and queued up his watch for another 10. Every mile got worse gradually and predictably, and he reflected that while it would have been too much to dive directly into the pain of, say, the 27th, it was manageable when he did it this way, with structure and in series. And still, his body kept finding and holding the pace that he'd set, his legs and heart and lungs all aware of it each time the weaker parts of him tried to cheat the workout. It amazed him, and more than once he thought he'd instigated something dangerous. Though his recovery laps slowed to feeble, shuffle-stepping jogs, at the end of each, he pulled the first lungful of breath and launched into it again. Coming into the first curve of his last mile, his 30th, his throat filled with hot acid. One heaving breath later, it rolled back and he could swallow, but he still spat and tasted bile, felt something hard pass between his lips. His legs vibrated with pain, his calves and hamstrings all threatening to lock and throw him to the ground, but he pulled them through the same motion one more time, one more time, one more time, rounding the track with 600, then 500 yards to go, still on the bubble of his pace. Cramps racked his side, like knives sliding up beneath his ribs and feeling around. Closing in on the finish, that line he'd crossed now 100+ times. He should know how many, but his math was leaving him. He wondered if it could really be a matter of oxygen to the brain. But now every step was the last one over that particular piece of goddamned all-weather track, and his vision purpled, and his head felt filled with carbonation. 10 yards beyond the finish, legs pinwheeling just to curb his momentum, he keeled to the right and fell. The pain felt intimate, as he was aware of every joint bouncing over the track's surface, but it felt distant, too, like it was happening to someone else, telegraphed in from another continent, irrelevant to him in the moment. He lay panting, and would have laughed if he'd had the air for it. He'd proven a thing, he was proving nothing, lying here. A ragged whistling sound, like a small baby's crying from far away, reached his ears. For a minute or more it neither diminished nor got louder, unnervingly regular and unvarying in pitch, and he wondered who had brought their child out to the track. Then, finally, he identified the sound as his own breath, keening softly from his open mouth. The sun was fully up now, and he was alone. Anyone watching, any ordinary citizens out walking laps, would probably be dialing an ambulance. May's sun angled gently into his eyes. He learned multiple things that day. One was that his body was stupid, or maybe just all his switches had been finally overridden. He'd pushed his bag of bones and meat past the point of return so many times it no longer cared, no longer bothered throwing up the flags and false warnings of catastrophic system failure. The machine would just do what he told it until it really did break. Another thing he came to understand was that, while he had more distance in him, faster just wasn't going to happen. He'd strung 30 sub-5-minute miles in a row, and to win anything memorable, to make a real name for himself as a marathoner, he'd have to do 26 miles like them, without recovery. Targeted training and a proper taper could do a lot, of course, in theory, but he also knew what his subservient body, too dumb to lie, was reporting in no uncertain terms. Muscle fibers have memory, and he'd programmed some of his indelibly by now. Hell, he'd known this. At least on some level, he'd understood what he was doing to himself all along. And now, trying to undo it, he'd be coming from behind, his body already tuned away from the requisite speed. Soon, meanwhile, he would already be getting old for faster, at a disadvantage against who knew how many starry-eyed kids. Intentionally or not, he'd built his body into what it was now. The last thing he consciously realized was, simply, he was less than Deb needed him to be. He'd made promises he couldn't deliver, and let wishful thinking start him down paths he could never complete. Instead of thinking through any of the sensible options, he panicked. Later that week, in a frantic, grabbing gesture, he proposed. He had no ring, and no speech rehearsed. He could tell she was taken aback, withdrawing for a moment, composing herself. Maybe he had wanted her to turn him down, for her to be the one to end the excruciating, drawn-out slipping away that their relationship had become. When she said yes, he had honestly been surprised. Since then, 3 years that felt more like 30 had passed. Dan's father had died. His daughter had been born. Through it all, the world had kept spinning, everything from planets to atoms hurtling down their same blind trajectories.
Okay, there you go. Thank you very much, Dave. By the way, Dave is, if you're in the Ohio area at least, I'm not sure any farther than that, but he periodically is giving book readings, and I have actually organized a book reading with Dave coming to Middletown, Ohio. So he's coming to Spoken Bicycles. Tentatively, we've agreed on May 1st, 2018. He's coming to Spoken Bicycles. Or is it Spoken Bikes? Spoken Bicycles. The bike shop, the new bike shop here in Middletown. He's coming to give a reading or something. We're going to do something with this book. I don't know if he's going to read from it or question or answer or whatever. But that will be on May 1st. Spoken Bicycles is a new bike shop that every Tuesday night I do a run from the bike shop, so you should check out the bike shop as well. Very cool bike shop, and it has a little craft bar inside. They sell craft beers inside. So after our run, we always have a beer. So cool little place, and hopefully I'll get to meet Dave actually in person for the first time there on May 1st. So if you're in the area, come on up to Spoken Bicycles on May 1st. Again, more information about Dave at dave-essinger.com. I'll put a link to that on runsmith.net. He's also working on a new novel. Let's see. I think it's called This World and the Next. And he says it's a sprawling, near-term post-apocalyptic epic beginning when 14-year-old ace gamer and Air Force brat Rosa Calder takes shelter with her family from seemingly harmless power outage. But when they come back above ground, their world and everything Rosa has ever known is gone. All right, so there's some information about that book as well on his website. So that's his next book, and I like post-apocalyptic novels. So should be good. I'll have to check that out. Oh, here's what I have for you. You can win a copy of his book. All right, I have a signed copy. Oh, here it is up here. I'm holding it up to the camera again. I have a signed copy of his book. See, I have 2 copies of his book. See, one for me, and I have another copy, and I'm going to give it to one of you. It's very easy for you to win. I'm just double checking that it really is signed. Yes, it does say. Signed by Dave. You can win it. All you have to do is send me an email and say you want the book. Okay? No, you're not going to be put on an email list and get a million emails or anything like that. But that's how you win. It just seemed like the simplest way to do it. And I will just randomly pick a person. And I don't have thousands of listeners, so your odds are relatively good compared to most podcasts. We'll see what your odds are, but I'll just come up with some way. Maybe I'll just number them and then use a random number generator, and the 8th email will win or something like that. So one of you will get a free copy of Dave's book. All I'll do is respond and say, you won, and what's your address? And I'll put it in the mail and send it to you. Okay? So send me an email. It's on my website at runsmith.net, but I'll tell you here, it's kemsmith1@gmail.com. I'll tell you again at the end of the show. kemsmith1@gmail.com. That's it. That's all I have. Oh, by the way, while that was reading, I pulled out my Once a Runner book. I remember that I actually have that book. This is the book from Bill Kenley's little story that the Chambers was reading from, and I've actually not read it yet. I have a number of books I still haven't read. So now I'm kind of thinking I'm going to put this next on my reading list. Maybe I'll do a review of this book. I know it's a fairly famous running book, and I have it. Once a Runner by John L. Parker Jr. I have it right here, so maybe that'll be my next book to read and review. Okay, that's all I have for the book reviews, but how long have we been going here? We've been going for an hour and 20 minutes, I think. I have just enough time for my general education segment, which, as you know, if you listen, has nothing whatsoever to do with running. Generally, although this one kind of does, actually. It's one that does fit in a little bit. All right? So this has to do with crying and your nose running. Okay, so if you read Dave's book or other books, or maybe you go to a sad movie or a happy movie, you might cry. Okay? Here's the question. Why does your nose run when you cry? All right? Maybe not always, but sometimes when you cry, your nose runs. All right? And for me, I was also wondering, why does my nose run when I do? You may have heard that little joke. My nose runs when I do. And this is especially prominent in the winter, I'll notice. My nose just runs like crazy. I mean, it's just... I'm not running in the winter, and there's just a constant drip of runny nose hanging off my nose the whole time, to the point where I don't even bother rubbing it off anymore because it's just going to always be there. It's like a spigot. Okay? So I did a little research on this, all right? So first I had to actually research tears. Here's another case, kind of like last week. I sometimes cannot believe how ignorant I am of simple phenomena. Okay, this seems really trivial. I didn't know how this worked. How I didn't know how this worked is beyond me, but I didn't. So I did a little reading, and here's something I got from 2 or 3 different websites. Every minute, a person generates about 1 or 2 microliters worth of tears. And I can tell you as a chemist, a microliter you can barely see. It's not even a drop. It's like 1/100th of a drop. Very, very tiny. Your eyes probably can't see a microliter. Even 5 microliters gets on the edge of your vision, pretty much. So every minute, a person generates about 1 or 2 microliters worth of tears. So you're always generating them. They are a mix of oil, mucus, and water. Didn't even know that. Secreted from different glands and cells around the eye. Tears serve to keep the eyeball surface lubricated. When you blink, your lids work like windshield wipers to push those tears into a pair of tiny holes called puncta, P-U-N-C-T-A. The singular of that is punctum, which lead to 2 sacs between the eyes. Blinking also squeezes those sacs, draining the liquid down the back of the nose and throat through the tear duct. This system operates throughout the day, although you'd never notice. Okay, I did not have any idea about this. Let me continue. If your eye gets irritated or you're feeling sad, tear production ramps up. The lacrimal gland, which sits above and on the outside of each eye, secretes water until your eyes fill up and overflow. This dilutes the oil and mucus, by the way, so counterintuitively, extra watery tears don't moisten your eyes. They will dry them out because they'll wash out the mucus and the oil. So here's the things I didn't know. So right next to your nose, in your eyes, right next to your nose, you've got little holes that drain down into your throat. I guess I didn't even totally understand that. Those are the things called puncta. And that is your tear duct going down into the back of your throat. And do this. Google puncta, P-U-N-C-T-A. Google it, because they have pictures of these. Some are like cartoons, but you'll find pictures of these little things. There's actually a little tiny hole there. in the corner of your eye, the inside corner of your eye. I didn't even know this. Okay, I also didn't know this lacrimal gland was above your eye, is mainly where this gland is that's producing the water. It sounds like there's various glands, but the lacrimal one secretes water. There might be other glands that secrete the mucus and the oils. But it's above your eye, kind of on the outside, behind your eyelid, is your lacrimal gland. There's like a specific spot. See, I thought maybe the tears were produced in the corner of your eye. So I had no idea how this worked. I'm guessing a whole bunch of you understood this. Obviously, if you're a doctor type, you knew it, but a whole bunch of you probably knew this. I never had an anatomy class. Now I kind of wish I would have. So anyway, Google, do an image search on puncta or punctum and on lacrimal gland, Lacrimal. Just how it sounds, but with the C. Lacrimal. Lacrimal. And you can see pictures of these things, or little cartoons of these things. Anyway, I'm just embarrassed I didn't know how that worked. Anyway, each eye can hold about 7 microliters of fluid. When this threshold has been crossed, tears dribble out of your eyes and down your cheeks. Excess tears can also flood the drainage ducts that lead into the nasal passage, hence the runny nose. So if you're getting a lot of watery eye, it goes down into your nose, and boop, there you go. I'm assuming I never read this, but this whole thing is very interesting. I mean, why would you bother having something go into your nose like that? Why do you have that tear duct? I don't know. I didn't read it, but maybe this helps keep your nose moist. I don't know. I guess. I never read that anywhere, but maybe I should have. Maybe I should have Googled, how do you keep your nose moist? And maybe it would have said that, but maybe that's helps with moisture in your nose. So that's pretty smart if that's the case, right? So you make tears to wash your eyes, and then instead of throwing it away, you let it go into your nose to moisten your nose? I don't know. Anyway, so crying makes your nose run because the tears go down into your nose. So my thought was regarding why my nose runs when I do. This was my thought, was that when you're out running, either your eyes are drying out, so you're making kind of a whole bunch of tears to try to wet them again to replace the liquids, or maybe you're getting a little dust in your eyes. Even if you don't know it, it's getting dusty, and so you're making all this water, and so that's what goes into your nose, and that's why your nose runs more when you're running. And maybe when it's cold out, it's less humid, so it's making even more. That's why it happens more in the winter. That's what I thought. But I did some research, and that doesn't sound quite like it, like what's happening. In fact, this sounds like when your nose runs when you're running, it may not have anything to do with your tears. So one article I read says your nose runs if you have exercise-induced rhinitis. And it's a lot like allergic rhinitis, otherwise called hay fever, or nasal allergies. So you can get like a nasal allergy induced by running. So this doesn't sound to me like it's an eyeball thing. I don't know, maybe it is. Maybe it induces a whole bunch of tears. Whatever. Anyway, exercise-induced rhinitis is common among athletes, whether they have an underlying nasal allergy or not, but it is more common in those who do have the allergies. And yes, rhinitis symptoms are more common in the winter. So there you go. It's this induced nasal allergies from running, and they're more common in winter. Between 10 and 20% of Americans suffer from allergic rhinitis, but strangely, 40% of endurance athletes suffer from the condition. And while it's well known that exercise can trigger asthma and some other things, it is not well understood what triggers the annoying allergy-like symptoms. So for some reason, yes, endurance training, like going out to run, increases your odds of having this exercise or this allergic rhinitis. Running causes it to happen, and they don't know why. But the latest medical theory research is narrowing in. This is their sentence. That's goofed up, not me. The latest theory is that it may be pollution that's causing it. In particular, nitrogen dioxide found in car exhausts. So this is one theory, that car exhaust, nitrogen dioxide, is causing this exercise-induced nasal allergies. and they are studying it, I guess. Exercise-induced rhinitis won't cause you any real harm, generally. It's more of a nuisance that snots up your nose and clothes. But if you regularly work out and your nose is really bugging you, you can use a nasal spray, and they talk about ipratropium bromide nasal spray. If it's in your lungs, you can use an albuterol inhaler before exercise, and in other ways, you can get some treatment for it if it's really, really, really bad. For me, it's just a runny nose, and it goes away when I go back when I'm done and I go back in the warm area. So I guess it's not a big deal. So like I said, a Google search puncta or punctum and lacrimal gland. By the way, chemists know the word lacrimator. So a common word that we talk about. It's anything that causes you to cry, a chemical that causes you to cry. We'll call it a lacrimator. So chemical compounds are categorized by different properties they have. Some are oxidizers, some blow up easily, things like that. Some are corrosive, and there's also lacrimators. They make you cry very easily. For example, hydrochloric acid. HCl is actually a gas. You dissolve it in water, then it's hydrochloric acid. But if you have hydrochloric acid bottle, vapors can come up, get in your eye, and cause you to cry. It's a lacrimator. There's a bunch of other chemicals that are lacrimators. Tear gas. Think about tear gas. That's a lacrimator. It makes you cry. Here's another little note, by the way. Eye makeup. Do you wear eye makeup? Eye makeup can end up in the back of your nose through your tear duct and can even block up your tear ducts. So normally, if you have makeup, it's almost assuredly getting down into your nose. Normally, it's a small amount. Your body can take care of it. You probably swallow it. It's a small amount, and it doesn't hurt you. But if you wear a lot of makeup, I guess, or you just have small tear ducts or whatever, it can go down in there and clog it up. So I guess once in a while, this can be an issue. Sounds kind of gross. But anyway, there you go. All right, I'm done with the show. All right. That is it. So a few things. Number one, remember the show will be put on YouTube eventually. By the way, I'm doing this at night because tomorrow I'm going to Cleveland, Ohio to do a race, the Buzzard Day 50K. And I wanted to be able to listen to this. I always listen to it to make sure. Yes, I stumble like an idiot, but I wanted to make sure the sound is okay. I have had times I've had to re-record shows, so now I can listen to it while I'm driving to make sure the sound is okay. So if anyone's you're not going to hear this in time. Next week, I'll be at the Knoxville Marathon. I may have this out in time before then, so if anyone's at the Knoxville Marathon, let me know. Anyway, this show will be on YouTube eventually. I've recorded it as a video, but it always takes a week longer than it takes me to put up the podcast. So it goes on the podcast first, YouTube a little bit later. You can find out more about me at my website at runsmith.net. Just remember that if you can. But my Facebook is Runsmith Enterprises. Please ask to join the group, Runsmith Enterprises. Twitter at Runsmith E, the letter E, just Runsmith and the letter E, all one thing. Instagram, Tim C. Smith 1961. Email, chemsmith1@gmail.com. Like the beginning of the word chemistry, CHEM. Chemsmith, and then their number 1. chemsmith1@gmail.com. Email me if you want the free book. I will just send it to you in the mail. All right, please email me. All right. Also, on my website, you can find my coaching services. Yes, I'm a running coach. Please leave a rating and a review on iTunes. Can you just kind of make a note right now to yourself? Send yourself an email or something that the next time you're on your home computer, you'll go to iTunes and you'll leave me a rating, a review. Please. And send me an email otherwise besides the free book, but anytime send me an email with any comments you have at all. And thanks again to Health IQ. Please visit them at healthiq.com/endurance. And I think that's all. This is Runsmith Enterprises presenting Topics in Endurance Sports, signing out. Have a fun workout.